There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, there's been a lot of coverage lately on the major cases that we've all covered in the podcast world. Of course, the Idaho case, Ethan Chapin, Zaina Coronel, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves was covered last night by 48 Hours. And we've covered that case since the very beginning, and a lot of legal things are going on without the attorneys, cameras in the courtroom, discovery material, all of that stuff. But last night they also covered the Gilgo case, the Rex Uerman case. And is there anything new on the case that anyone should know? No, not really. I think everything has been sort of covered. However, there are new happenings all the time and new looks at the case. And people want to know answers to different questions. And one of the questions that we always had, of course, was the elephant in the room, and that's the disappearance of Amber Costello. And if you read the 32-page bail application, on page 7, it talks about Amber Costello last seen alive on September 2nd, 2010, leaving her residence at 1112 America Avenue in West Babylon during the late evening hours. At that time, she was believed to be working as an escort. On September 1st, the day prior to the disappearance of Amber Costello, Miss Costello's cell phone was contacted by a burner cell phone. On September 1st, 2010, the burner cell phone had communication with the Costello phone at approximately 11:33 p.m. and 11:34 p.m. During those communications, the burner cell phone connected to cell site towers in West Amityville and Massapequa Park. Thereafter, the burner cell phone traveled to West Babylon in proximity to the residence of Amber Costello and had contact with the Costello phone at approximately 12:05 a.m. on September 2nd, 2010. According to witnesses, around the time of these communications between the burner cell phone and the Costello phone on September 1st to 2nd, 2010, a escort client showed up at Miss Costello's residence located in West Babylon, New York. After the client entered a home, a ruse was executed on the client whereby a person pretended to be an outraged boyfriend of Amber Costello, and the client left the residence, while Amber Costello retained the money the client had brought to pay for the services. Based upon interviews, that client was described as a large white male, approximately 6'4" to 6'6" in height, in his mid-40s with dark, bushy hair and a big oval 1970 type eyeglasses. A witness described him to police as appearing like an ogre. Furthermore, a witness noticed a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche parked in the driveway of the residence. According to the witness, following the ruse, the client said he was just her friend. Tell her I'll give her a call, and walked out the front door. Thereafter, approximately 1:18 a.m. on September 2nd, after the ruse had been perpetrated, the burner cell phone sent a text message to the Costello phone which stated, "That was not so nice to do. Credit for the next time." Phone records show that the burner phone was located in Massapequa Park within 2 minutes of the text message sent. According to witnesses, later the next day on September 2nd, Miss Costello was again contacted by the same client that was in the house the night before with the Avalanche. Further, Amber told us that he wanted to see her again, but he didn't want to come back to the house because of her boyfriend. Thereafter, on September 2nd, 2010, at approximately 9:32 p.m., the same burner cell phone from the previous evening again communicated with the Costello phone. During this communication, the burner cell phone used a cell site location in Midtown Manhattan. Following this communication and based upon cell site records, the burner cell phone traveled to Massapequa Park and had contacts with the Costello phone at approximately 10:39 p.m. and 11:05 p.m. Cell site records for the burner phone indicate that approximately 11:17 p.m. the phone traveled to West Babylon in proximity to the residence of Amber Costello. Subsequently, Amber Costello left her cell phone behind, walked out the front door of the residence, and was seen alive for the last time. This was September 2nd, 2010. So why did I bother to go through the bail application and read that to you? Because that shows that they had this information in the case folder for over 12 years. 12 years that the green Chevy Avalanche was identified, as well as this gigantic man, 6'4" to 6'6", very large, appearing described as an ogre and as an eyeball witness. So the whole point of this is that why did it take them that long, 12 years, over 12 years, to properly check out this information? In addition, they had cell site information that the cell phone was hitting, the burner phone was hitting at a cell site in Massapequa Park and in Manhattan. They had that back in 2011, 2012. Why did it take them all those years? With me tonight to discuss this elephant in the room, I'll describe it as, is Professor and retired NYPD Sergeant, always one of my favorites, co-host Mike Geary. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, Billy, thank you for having me on. Good evening, everybody.
Mike, it's great to have you on. And now, Mike, the gist, of course, of this whole thing, I'll put the flyer. This was the flyer for the show, Gilgo, the investigation. What if? And the what if is what if they had done a proper investigation 12 years ago? What if? What could have happened? What could they have discovered? Would it have saved anyone's life if they had made the arrest way back then? We don't know potentially all the people that Rex Schumann may have. It's still an open investigation. Would this investigative, and it's really investigation 101, why that was not checked out properly or dug into as a really important lead, I don't have a clue.
Billy, it's just sheer maddening frustration that this sort of thing goes on. You know, hindsight is always 20/20. And, you know, you don't always want to second guess people because, you know, when you're presented with a problem and it's a missing persons report in the beginning and it's an escort, and you don't want to immediately jump to the conclusion that her being missing is a murder. And that's a shame because sometimes these missing person cases are actually murders. So the police, you know, they start off on their back foot. They're not aggressively going after it. They treat it as a missing person. Perhaps I'm hoping on behalf of the police in terms of their professionalism that they had interviewed the pimp boyfriend a number of times about what he saw, what he said, to see if he was consistent. I imagine the cell phone data probably took a month to 2 months to get, so maybe they put it aside for a while. We do know that at the moment that the Amber Costello went missing, the 4 bodies, had not been found. They were going to be found like about 8 months later, 9 months later. And so that's the irony, is that case was the one that really kicked off the whole Gilgo, serial killer investigation, where everybody is really aware that there's it's not just there's a couple of escorts missing here and there. It's that we actually have what we believe is a serial killer. And as you pointed out, the great question, is it possible that the lack of finding him and the lack of seeing this report meant that maybe someone else had died in the meantime between 2010 and 2023? We don't know. We don't think so. We hope not. But it may be, and we all can keep our fingers crossed, that he had killed his last person, that maybe Ms. Costello was the last person killed by Rex Sherman. I mean, hopefully we'll find out as they do more and more investigations, but it is maddening. And you can't blame people for being really frustrated and really angry, because once it was professionally done the right way with, Commissioner Harrison and ADA Tierney, you had great leadership. Once it was done, 6 weeks, boom, you got the name. And they spent the rest of the time after that watching, waiting, gathering extra evidence, keeping him under surveillance. But why, was his name? I'm sorry, was his description and his physical description and description of his car left, on a pile of paper? We don't know. That is maddening.
Mike, I'm going to show right here up on the screen. This is what's known as the Gilgo Four. Of course, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Amber Costello, and Megan Waterman. Now, Maureen Brainerd Barnes was missing since 2007. So they already had, there was a missing person report. But of course, as we know, a missing person is reported at the home of the missing person. So that would have been in Norwich, Connecticut.
Right.
We don't know if at that point they had connected because they hadn't found the bodies yet. Melissa Barthelemy, she was reported missing from the Bronx in 2009. Yeah. Amber Costello, again, last seen in 2010, and she was from North Babylon. Megan Waterman, Hauppauge, another Long Islander, last seen in 2010. So until they found these bodies, which occurred on December 11th, 2010, the chronology gets a little bit confusing.
Right.
But so the commonality, and think of being a detective in 2010, was they were all escorts.
Mm-hmm.
They were all petite young women, and they were all called utilizing a burner phone. Now, the information in regards to Amber Costello and this green Chevy Avalanche, she was also called with a burner phone. And they have an eyeball witness. Again, This guy, I'm going to show a video last night that was on 48 Hours. And this is her roommate, some said pimp, Dave Schaller, who, again, right in this interview on 48 Hours, is a lot more lucid and looks like he got his life together. Back then, he was apparently a drug addict, and they were all using drugs at that time, including Amber. Let me play a little bit of this, and this will shed a little bit more light on this.
Before Amber Costello went missing, her friend and former roommate Dave Schaller says she had received repeated phone calls from a client.
This guy was so relentless. He called several times. He was on the phone with her for quite a while each time.
And they knew that Megan Waterman and Melissa Barthelemy were also contacted by burner phones.
Very important, Mike. This is very important from an investigative standpoint. Now they have this description of a Chevy Avalanche, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a description of a man 6'4" to 6'6", described as an ogre.
Rather
unique looking, yeah. Anywhere from 250 to 300 pounds, according to how many meals he had that day. That was supposed to be funny. Anyway, one of the things that most investigators would do. Wait a minute, they describe the box. The box is the box where the cell phone is hitting, pinging cell sites. One's Massapequa Park, one is Manhattan, and then they even have some out in Suffolk County. So couldn't, as investigators, when they meet together and they discuss an investigation, and they call it spitballing, I used to call it hypothesizing and theorizing, sitting around and talking about what if, what do you think this, what do you think that, how about, could there be a possibility that he lives in Massapequa Park and that he takes the Long Island Railroad to work? Is that a possibility? So what are we going to do? We're going to canvass the train station. We're going to go out there and we're going to sit at the train station, the Long Island Railroad, from 5:30 in the morning to 8 in the morning for 5 consecutive days till we spot this green Chevy Avalanche and this gigantic man. Is that reasonable?
Billy, it is reasonable. It is reasonable. And it makes you just wonder, are they even talking to each other? I mean, Norwich, Connecticut, okay, that's a different state, nowhere near Long Island. You got to go across the Sound. The Bronx, I'm not sure where Ms. Bartholomew, where she was located in the Bronx. It's one of the 12 Bronx precincts. I'm not sure if there was back then a missing persons database specifically for escorts or anything like that. But Amber Costello, Megan Waterman, and those two, at least you would think that there'd be maybe a couple of phone calls made, something like that. Even if one was, Nassau and the other Suffolk, one was in a town in Nassau, and then you got the Nassau County or town in Suffolk, and you got the Suffolk County Police. You'd think there'd be a couple of phone calls made, something like that. It is maddening. It is, because you're like, maybe they just took it. Let's slow down. We got these missing escorts. They eventually all show up all the time. We're not going to have to worry about this sort of thing. Maybe they just put it on the back burner. Infuriating. Yeah. It's really, really terrible.
But something, Mike, one of the things that I would be a little worried about was, sometimes police can make it difficult to make a missing person report. They always will jerk people around and say, oh, you have to wait 24 hours. You got to wait 36 hours. And that's not true. There's other things that make someone a missing person report. However, if someone is an escort, I will tell you right now, it will be much more difficult to report them missing, because usually the person reporting that individual missing has to be a family member or someone that lives with them. And even then, that's a tough thing. And the missing person report is filed in the resident precinct of the missing person, which makes it more difficult too, with at least two of these missing persons, because they were not from this area. One is from Norwich, Connecticut, and one of them is from the Bronx.
Right.
So you have to get two more police department jurisdictions involved in this, so you can understand the red tape and the frustration that someone could have that might not be a family member to try to get a missing person report prepared. And the fact that they're escorts, they could have been blown off because of that. Or the person that may have wanted to report them missing could have been like, they're not going to believe me because she's an escort. Your thoughts?
Right, Billy, you and I ran into this on patrol as patrolman, as a sergeant. You get a call, and in the rules in New York City, like many places, many municipalities, years and years ago, you had to wait 24 hours no matter what. But then they loosened them up and they made it a lot more responsive, where, a missing person was, anybody that could, and you'd have to take immediate action if it was a child, an elderly person, a person with dementia, a person who is in need of medicine, like, say, for instance, they're diabetic or something like that, a person who may have had threats made against them, person who may have had some suicidal ideation and maybe talked about suicide, somebody at a heightened risk. And we were always told, just take the damn report, because you don't want this sort of thing to happen. But even if you take the report, and it goes to the from patrol.
After 7 days, it goes to the missing person squad.
Right. And you hope that it actually gets there in 7 days. And you hope that the person in the missing person squad who is going to be assigned to it is actually paying attention and is not off on another, couple of cases in and out of the office. And unfortunately, the reality of what the book says you should do and how things are supposed to work out, and I know, isn't nearly the way it really is in real life.
Absolutely. Deborah Hillman, this was during Jim Burke's reign. He actively hid and redirected info about these cases by him and then District Attorney Tom Spoda. The DA at the time is in jail today for covering for Jim Burke corruption. Deborah, no doubt there was corruption in that department. However, Chief Burke didn't take over the case till 2012. His reign in Suffolk County was 2012 to 2015. These people were found I believe it was 2010, December 11th, 2010. So it was 2 years, or at least a year and more before he took over. I'm acknowledging there was corruption. However, again, this was prior to his reign. So we want to know what the hell happened at this, before he took over.
They called it the box. In 2020.
So, this is, to me, this is not only an elephant, this is a rhinoceros in the room. It's 6 weeks after a task force has been put together, 12 years after this case, they identify potentially the Gilgo Long Island serial killer. 12 years, and it took them 6 weeks. What was going on for those 12 years? And again, people are mentioning it in the chat, corruption, but there had to be more than that. How did this huge clue, this huge information somehow get lost and not acted upon for 12 years?
Yeah, Billy, you got, we mentioned this a few times, and even the Commissioner Harrison mentioned it when he got on board in 2022, when he saw what was going on with the case. He was shocked that there was only one detective assigned to the case, one homicide detective assigned to the case. This person had no help and was also catching cases. So we're not sure if there was really any resources really committed, not a sergeant and say 4 detectives or anything like that, not a lieutenant, 2 sergeants and 12 detectives, nothing like that. One detective, and he's catching other cases. He's in and out of the office all day. He can't follow up. Whether you're a good detective or you're just barely breathing as a human being, barely having a pulse, you're probably not going to get too far because you don't have the time to do this. It's sad and it's infuriating, and is incompetence somewhat a facet of corruption? Perhaps it is. It is really, really it's inexcusable no matter what. If it's incompetence or corruption, it's totally inexcusable.
I agree. WW Equestrian Center and Exotics. I know he hasn't been convicted, but there is overwhelming evidence. So, Bill and Mike, do you honestly think these were his earliest victims, or do you think there could be earlier victims? I personally think he's got more victims earlier in his life. There's many things that we don't know about Rex Heuermann. It's very early in the investigation. He's not going to confess to this. The only way I think he will talk is if he goes to trial and he gets convicted and he's going to be doing life without parole, and maybe to get more privileges in prison, maybe he'll talk. At that point, he would be allowed to talk because he's got nothing to lose. Again, New York State does not have the death penalty. If we did, this would be a death penalty case. However, in 2014, New York State did away with the death penalty, and the death penalty is not a panacea. However, it is a good bargaining chip to get convicted killers to plead before trial with the threat of the death penalty hanging over their head.
Yeah, Billy, we've talked about this before, and I think a lot of people, you, me, and a number of other people, think that Bobby Chacon, and Jim Clemente, we all think he probably has had more bodies other than these 4. Perhaps maybe one down in South Carolina, but it could possibly be, and we could only hope that there was no one after Amber Costello. We can only hope for that. Keep our fingers crossed. But I'm a cynic, and I think there's probably several other bodies, at least, that have not yet been discovered, or some of the bodies previously that are still unidentified may belong to him. Perhaps, maybe, they're not Joel Rifkin's. We know that, but it's possible. I wish we had the death penalty to use as a sort of Damocles to hang over his head, just waiting there to chop his head off, because that's the only way you could have leverage. We could talk about the Koberger case, having the idea of a firing squad. Maybe your final, your final day on earth is going to be before a firing squad. can really put a damper on your feelings of immortality. So therefore, I think whether or not you like it or you ever really use it, it is a useful tool to put a lot of pressure on a criminal defendant. So yeah, we did away with it. Yeah, a decade ago. Sadly, we did away with it.
Absolutely.
Against Huerman was building, but investigators also had physical evidence from the crime scenes they wondered if they could link to him. After authorities found Megan Waterman in 2010, they found a male hair sample on the burlap around her body. In January 2023, a surveillance team, after his arrest for the murders of Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, and Melissa Barthelemy, Rex Huerman pleaded not guilty.
Folks, one of the commonalities, and 48 Hours last night didn't report anything that we didn't already know. It was all in that 32-page bail application report. And for some reason, the press loves the story about the pizza. They love the surreptitious collection of his DNA from the pizza crust and compared with the hairs that were found, I believe they said the body of Melissa Barthelemy. That one of the hairs belonged to him. And there was also 3 hairs on separate burlap bags tied up to the bodies that came back to Rex Huerman's wife, Asa Ellerup. So very strong evidence. And in addition, we talk about circumstantial evidence, that from which inferences are drawn. And you'll always hear people that don't know much about evidence to say, oh, it's circumstantial. And Mike Geary here, Professor Mike Geary, being an attorney, can describe to you or just assure you how strong a tractor trailer full of circumstantial evidence is. Mike.
Yeah, I'm teaching an evidence class in the fall right now in my college, and we've talked about this actually about a week ago. Yeah, direct evidence, and everybody says, "Oh, direct evidence is strong, circumstantial evidence is weak." And we talked to them. What is direct evidence? Direct evidence is of an eyewitness that describes actually watching the crime take place. It is perhaps surveillance video of the crime actually taking place, a shootout in front of a 7-Eleven, that sort of thing, security camera footage. Or it could be the incriminating statements themselves from a perpetrator, a suspect in a crime. Let's see, circumstantial evidence. Let's just see how strong that is. Well, let's see. Fingerprints, that's circumstantial evidence. Fingerprints at a crime scene that belong to the suspect. DNA left at a crime scene that belongs to a suspect. Things like that. We have surveillance video that may show a person entering a home, leaving a home, but actually not show the actual burglary taking place. That is surveillance video that shows a little bit of a piece of the crime. Therefore, an inference must be drawn by the jury. So blood, of your type left at a crime scene. Things like that. Prior statements that you made, telephone calls that you may have made, where you were when you made a threatening phone call. Did you ever write a threatening letter? Your handwriting, and analyzed belonging to you, a text message coming from your cell phone. All of these little things, they are circumstantial evidence, and you put them together, allow reasonable jurors to come up with just reasonable, in their own reasonable human experience, to say, what does that mean? What does it mean that your fingerprints are at the crime scene? What does it mean that your DNA is at the crime scene? What does it mean that you made a threatening phone call a week prior to the person actually being killed? That sort of thing. That is all circumstantial evidence, and nobody can tell me that is not really as strong or as convincing to a jury as a defendant's own statement or an eyewitness's own statement. Definitely, it's just as strong.
Absolutely, Mike. Absolutely. Let me hang on one second. I wanted to play this here. I'm having some problems with this. Nope, that's not what I was looking for. Hang on. I was looking to play. I want to play this because this is what was the catalyst to actually finding the rest of the bodies. And again, the feelings of this case here were not as strong as some felt it was an accident, but a lot of people think that this was a murder.
I'm in Long Island. Where on Long Island are you?
Okay, let's talk.
No. 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 No, stop. No. Where in Long Island are you? In Suffolk County? Nassau County? Huh? Why? Why you call me by my name? Why? County, you on the line? Stop. Please. Stop it, please. Please stop. Please, into the door.
No, time to go.
Please. Please.
Please.
Please.
Go that way, please. Go, come on, let's go. Come on, we're all going to exercise. Come on, go outside. Come on, all of us. Come on, we're all going outside. Come on.
No, please.
Come on. Please, come on.
Please.
Come on.
Why?
Just come on. I'm going upstairs. You leave. I'm going upstairs. I'm going upstairs. You leave. I'm going upstairs. Okay? You leave, please. Please, get there. My clothes. All right. What's the matter? Are you okay?
What are you going to do? What are you going to do to me?
So that is, admittedly, that's a disturbing several 911 calls, not just one 911 caller, but absolutely disturbing. And many people think that, she was murdered. But the position of the police is, and in addition, not just the initial police that investigated this, but Rodney Harrison and the Gilgo Beach task force that now put this case together and identified Rex Heuermann, they feel that she died in an accident, but no one from the public, her attorney, Johnny Ray, who's kept this case alive for 12 or 13 years, no one wants to believe that. And it is disturbing when you listen to the 911 calls. But again, the police were on the scene. The autopsy that was done on Shannan Gilbert by the Suffolk County chief medical examiner came back as inconclusive, that he did not rule it a homicide. The death was ruled inconclusive. Now, we all know the manner of death is homicide, suicide, accidental, or natural. And he couldn't determine what category it fit in. However, the attorney, Johnny Ray, and the family, Shannan Gilbert's family, hired Dr. Michael Baden, the former New York City chief medical examiner. And he ruled the same thing, but he said the hyoid bone was broken, which indicates asphyxia, strangulation. And he said, even though I can't determine it's a homicide, the hyoid bone's broken, so I'm going to say it's a homicide.
Yeah, Billy, we talked about this. This doesn't fit Heuermann's antics that we know about. She was contacted. We know who her driver was, if you want to call him the pimp, whatever you want to use for that term. We know her. We know the customer. We know the address she went to, where she was there for a few hours. We have the 911. We know Heuermann is, we have the tape. We know Heuermann isn't into conflict. He ran away when he's probably at least a foot taller than, the boyfriend.
Dave Schaller.
Dave Schaller. Okay, yeah. I couldn't think of his name. Dave Schaller. So he's not into that. He wants to get these girls by himself. This thing here, we know who the homeowner was, and it has nothing, to me, I don't think it has anything to do with Heuermann at all. But I could understand people wanting to hope to hang it on Heuermann's shoulders and say, this must be his too.
Mike, I don't think people think it was Rex Heuermann. I think they think someone else killed her. And for example, many people put Chief James Burke in there.
No.
His name, I agree.
Yeah.
But many people, the conspiracy theorists,
Yeah.
say, wait a minute, that could have been James Burke. He could have been out there. And, I know to me, it doesn't fit either. And I want to play a little bit of Rodney Harrison, and he addresses this.
A part of this mass murders are out there.
It's a horrible accident. It's a horrible accident. And as of right now, myself and the investigators assigned to the homicide squad still believe that it was just an incident where she ran into the marsh and unfortunately drowned on that horrible day.
You've said that the green Avalanche, the Chevy Avalanche, was key. How did you get there?
So one of the investigators that was assigned to the task force, she came from the state police. And I'll get into how the state police became part of the task force in a second. But they had access to a certain type of database that they were able to track down a green Avalanche inside that Massapequa Park box. And then we were able to take a look at that car being registered to our subject, Rex Heuermann. And once we got that information, that intel, then we started looking to Rex Heuermann's lifestyle. We started working with the district attorney's office and taking a look at phone records and getting subpoenas for a host of other things. And it really assisted us in honing in our efforts into Mr. Heuermann. I've investigated homicides personally. I was a detective in the 7-1 squad. Homicide investigations don't always go in the right direction. The first subject that you identify sometimes is not always the individual who is held accountable. A lot of people are challenging the Suffolk County Police Department regarding beginning steps in the investigation and what was done wrong. And I think it's very unfair. I will say this, that this was a long journey of a case. There was some good work done prior to me getting here. I want to make sure that this is very clear regarding identifying the box in Massapequa Park and as well as over in Midtown Manhattan. But just putting that dedicated team together, putting that one investigator from the state police and putting them to the task force, and now she using her database helped us really get this case some good legs and be able to identify Rex Heuermann and go forward with being able to place him under arrest.
Now, when you say the box, you're talking about the box that was made identifiable through cell phone data analysis.
Correct.
Let me ask you this. You said publicly, you called Rex Heuermann a demon.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Heuermann is a demon that walks among us, a predator that ruined families.
At what point did you decide that that was the best characterization of him?
Yeah, and a lot of people have.
I just want to get to it, Mike, that I love Rodney Harrison. I think he's great. I think he was the catalyst to solving this case, but it still doesn't explain why 12 years went by and this information was in the case folder until they put this task force together, and he gives straight out credit to a female detective from New York State Police, and I believe she used a database called the Lawman Search, which is a database that can search vehicles all over the state. And they identified the vehicle, and it was from Massapequa Park, and they connected that to Heuermann, and then all the dots started getting connected. Roger Still, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Always riveting. Thanks, Sergeant and Professor Geary. Thank you so much. So that, to me, again, we talk about the elephant in the room. That's how did it take 12 years that smoking gun information that maybe no one recognized it as a smoking gun was sitting in the case folder, and it identified the Gilgo serial killer, and it sat there for 12 years. That's the only thing I'm not buying. And as I said, Rodney Harrison was the key, starting this task force, putting it together. He's the one that got this going. Let me just go to a quick commercial, Mike. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. If you're brand new to this podcast, put a 2 in the chat. If you're a certified veteran, put a 1 in the chat. And all you 2s, the 1s are going to tell you, subscribe to this podcast. It's one of the best. And if you want to help us out financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with, count 'em, 5 different levels. And you see the folks in the green font. They are part of our YouTube family, our friends, our subscribers, and they help really support this channel. And we appreciate the hell out of them. So, Mike, back to the show.
Yeah, you hear Rodney Harrison. He is a class act all the way from A to Z, and he's he's being very, very circumspect. He doesn't, thou shalt not, speak ill of your predecessors, and he's trying his hardest to say there was some good information done, good work done, and he talked about specifically the box, Midtown Manhattan, Massapequa Park. Yeah, that is true. That is true. And he didn't really want to address the issue at all, like you mentioned, about that one file sitting there that was unopened and not left to the side, no one's paying attention to. And I think he tried to be his hardest not to sit there and say, that one good thing was done, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, just diminish what was done, but that's a lot of work. But he never addressed that, that one issue. And I think he's just trying to be a class act, and he doesn't want to name names. And I'm sure, though, off camera, behind the scenes, when they came up with that lawman search done by this the female trooper from the New York State, they were all probably like shaking their head, going, "Oh my goodness!" Like, we could have had this guy. There was a lot of people, banging their heads against the wall when that happened, and he doesn't want to go there. That's for later. Recriminations are for later. He doesn't want anybody to take their eye off the ball. God bless him. He's a great guy. Without him and without Tierney, also D.A. Tierney, this never would have happened. So thumbs up to him. And I got to respect him being very circumspect, circumstantial in the way he talked about his predecessors.
Absolutely. Sean Toodles, thank you for the 1999 super sticker. Okay, am I missing something? If the only evidence that points to anything at all is a broken hyoid bone, then why is it that she is saying it was probably a drowning? Please help me understand this, and thank you so much. Well, thank you for your
good question.
For your 1999. Also, thank you for your comments. Well, Sean Toodles, what the Suffolk County medical examiner did a thorough autopsy and decided that he could not rule on it based on the autopsy he did and the body that he recovered, and he ruled it. He basically couldn't make a ruling that it was a homicide or suicide, and he ruled accidental. Of course, it wasn't natural. She died out in the. But Dr. Bodden, he sort of ruled the same thing, but then he said, and I don't know how it was possible that the Suffolk County OCME could have missed a broken hyoid bone. I don't think he could. So that leaves one, you can draw a conclusion that maybe Michael Bodden is wrong, that his autopsy was not correct, and the OCME of Suffolk, or you could say maybe the Suffolk County OCME wasn't correct. I would err based on the facts and circumstances on the side of the Suffolk County OCME and not Dr. Biden. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, Billy, I was discussing actually this very issue with one of my daughters a few weeks ago, and she was asking me about this, and I explained to her that, when they find these bodies like the Gilgo 4 girls or Miss Gilbert's body in the marsh, it's really long time has passed. Nature has taken its course. Maybe animals have disturbed it. Maybe a few bones are missing, and so you're not getting like an Agatha Christie movie with there's a body in the library, and it's obviously an actress is lying there, and there's no blood, nothing. No, this is sometimes these people are dug up, and is really nothing but a little bones and some tattered pieces of clothing, and without any sort of tissue, and actually seeing marks on the neck. Okay, broken high bone is indicative of strangulation, but it could be that it was dislocated and not broken. Michael Baden hedged his bets and said he wouldn't overrule, but it was a suggestive of perhaps a homicide. But absolutely, all in all, when you got to look at it, Michael Baden actually didn't do the autopsy. He looked at maybe X-rays or pictures that were done, diagrams that were done. He wasn't in there at the same time at the Suffolk County homicide coroner office was doing it. Yeah, the ME. So he's looking at it from an academic discipline and using his experience, but he's not actually handling the body the way the actual coroner did. So all in all, you got to go with what the coroner said at that time to be fair to everyone concerned.
I agree. Martha Minor, Michael Pack was Shannon's driver and her pimp. Martha, you're correct. And the thing was that why I thought that it sounded like Shannan Gilbert was on some hallucinogenic drugs is because he drove her out there from the city. And then she didn't recognize him and was asking him, why are you calling me by my name? Like she didn't So is that not indicative of being high on some kind of substance that you don't recognize? And it wasn't the first time he drove her. He apparently always drove her. So she was asking those questions. I found that rather odd. Are all of the 911 calls, and there was a total of 3.
Yeah.
He goes to an elderly man's house who calls, and he's very lucid. And he calls 911 on her behalf and says she looks like a 14-year-old boy. That's what he said to 911. And then the third house she goes to was of a woman who wouldn't let her in the house because she was afraid. And then that was the last she saw her. She took off to be found in that marshy area and they're determining that it was an accident. And folks, I don't blame a lot of you or any of you for thinking differently that this is a homicide. I'm just putting forth the evidence. In addition, post this occurring, there was a tremendous police investigation. In New York City, they call it a CUPI, circumstances undetermined pending police investigation. So detectives will go out there and check and double check and do a thorough investigation to try to uncover what happened here. Their conclusion, and there's Suffolk County had all of this corruption, and many of you won't believe a word they say. And I'm just telling you what they determined. And Rodney Harrison agreed with their determination. So I'm going to put Rodney back on the screen now.
So, Commissioner, thank you for being here for your live appearance on the Pix Morning News. Good to see you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Let me begin first and foremost, Commissioner, with the surveillance video that was released of this arrest. We see the suspect walking down Fifth Avenue. Take us that moment, Commissioner, and why it was that very moment that you decided to move in.
So there was some concerns. The case was in the grand jury. We had to wait for the indictment for it, but we were concerned about some leaks and it getting out. And if it gets out and it gets to his attention, now it makes the investigation a whole lot more difficult. So after confirming with my partner Ray Tierney and discussing that this is something that we should move in right away, we chose to catch him at work and wait for him to come out and grab him right away.
You got him right.
Folks, it was very interesting because one of the biggest reasons, there were 2 main reasons that they took the case down when they did. The first is that Rex Heuermann was still using his burner phone and still calling sex workers. So they were afraid that he was going to kill someone else. Second reason, big reason, there was over 300 subpoenas involved in this case. If you write a subpoena and give it to a corporation or a bank or a phone company, Can you trust them to keep that a secret? Might they tip off the person who's the subject of the subpoena? They're not partners with the police. So they were afraid of that he was going to be tipped off potentially, and then he would flee the jurisdiction. So that was the two major reasons why they took the case down when they did. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, it's a great thing to do it the way they did it and as fast as they did it. If you've got surveillance probably close to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on him, those 6 months, 8 months, maybe a year that they were doing it. It's a lot of work, a lot of legwork. And sometimes you could lose the person, and you don't want to lose them and not, where he goes on the subway, on the LIE. We all know how that is, driving, trying to keep track of somebody. They had to do what they had to do because he was still using the burner phone, trying to contact people, looking up, maybe investigating the victims' families, and what would happen if he actually went over there and tried maybe to have some sort of relationship with one of if he figured out where their family was, figured out if there was a niece or nephew, whatever. You don't know. He's got a lot of time on his hands. Maybe he would attack someone, or at least harass someone, or try to scare the hell out of somebody. So he's a dangerous guy. He's a sick person, and if he ever thought that he was actually being followed, he would clam up. He wouldn't do anything. He would probably immediately drop everything and try to mitigate whatever damage there was. He's smart and stupid at the same time. So he's not a moron. So they did what they had to do, and they did it in a good way. Thank goodness they didn't try to take him in his house, because they were not aware of the 300 guns he had. They probably knew he had a number of firearms, but he had 50, 75 firearms. It's better they took him in Midtown Manhattan, surrounded him. As you could see on the capture video, they just came at him from a bunch of different angles. That's the best way to do it. They did it right, and they kept everything secret up until that last moment. That is professionalism, and that's Rodney Harrison, that's ADA Tierney, and that task force. They did a fabulous job.
Absolutely.
The whole reason for our searches here over the last number of months. We had and have an active missing persons case.
That missing persons case, the case of sex worker Shannan Gilbert, was the tipping point in what would turn out to be an extensive, mystifying hunt for a serial killer living in plain sight. Over the years, Gilbert's case was found not to be connected to the Gilgo 4, but the hunt for her remains is what spurred the initial investigation. It's a timeline that begins in July of 2007. That's when Maureen Brainerd Barnes went missing in New York City. She was contacted by a burner phone. The last time she was seen alive was July 9th, 2007. 2 years later, July 2009, was the last time Melissa Bartholomew was seen alive. The burner phone that contacted her was pinged in Massapequa Park. It was the search for her body that led to the Gilgo 4. Megan Waterman went missing in June of 2010, and in September of that year, Amber Costello was last seen alive. December of 2010, during the search for Bartholomew, their bodies were found in Gilgo Beach. The first, December 11th, 2010. The next three, December 13th. Fast forward to April of 2011. 4 more bodies are discovered, making investigators question how many killers are at work. Throughout the investigation, there have been multiple police commissioners, some who wanted the FBI and their search tools involved, and some who did not. But in 2018, Geraldine Hart became the 4th Suffolk Police Commissioner to oversee this investigation after a 20-year career with the FBI. Her tenure with the FBI brought an understanding of this case and a renewed sense of urgency, including the discovery of a leather belt ritualistically tied around the victims. And then December 2021, former NYPD Chief Rodney Harrison takes over as Suffolk Police Commissioner. And within a month, he establishes the Gilgo Beach Homicide Investigation Task Force. Their sole purpose? To bring the killer to justice. And they got their big break this week.
Now, in January of last year, the Suffolk County DA assigned a team of investigators to review every item of evidence in this investigation. 2 months in, they discovered a Chevy Avalanche. It was registered to Rex Uriman at the time of the murders. Investigators believe that is significant because they say, Steve and Natasha, it ties him to Amber Costello. Back to you.
Very well, Harry.
That was a pretty good, quick synopsis there. But again, the elephant in the room we're talking about during this whole episode here is, why did it take 12 years for that information that was in the case folder to be acted upon, and why 2 months or 6 weeks or 8, whatever it was, that the task force was established, that they identified Rex Heuermann. Just that is what I think every person that has followed this case wants to know the answer to. Mike?
Yeah, Bill, when you see the timeline and everything, it's astounding, and you see how quickly things got put together once you had Rodney Harrison. I'm his biggest cheerleader. You got that guy in the room, and he directed everything. He knew what he was doing. He's done so many investigations in the past. He knows exactly what he was doing. He put it together. One of the interesting things that I was surprised at was that they needed the New York State Police help in order to get to the New York State Police DMV database. I had always assumed, and I realized incorrectly, that all law enforcement personnel, sworn law enforcement personnel in the state of New York, had access to that DMV database. I was surprised.
Mike, I think they do. I think
they do.
Just
okay.
Probably the state police have a better working
Okay.
knowledge of it.
All right, because
they probably use it. They use it more often than any. The other thing was, a lot of this case was also led down to South Carolina.
Disappeared in 2017. We just spoke to the Sumter County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina.
After working with our colleagues in the Suffolk County area, we are happy to say that we're getting closer and very close to hopefully making an announcement soon.
Julia Ann Bean was last seen by her teen daughter on June 1st, 2017, traveling with a tall man in Sumter County, South Carolina, who gave the two women a ride to a nail salon.
It seems she does seem to remember that it may have been a truck.
But the daughter apparently wasn't specific about a green Chevy Avalanche, the kind that was removed from Rex Heuermann's South Carolina property, an hour north of Sumter, in July this year, after his arrest in New York as the accused serial killer. The daughter said her mother missed her high school graduation and sent her last message soon after.
Within a very short time, her mother began to text her asking her for pictures of her graduation.
Julia Ann Bean's friend, Heidi Kovis, who's from a different county, sounded alarm bells about a possible Rex Heuermann connection after she sent his photo and pictures of his Avalanche to the daughter in mid-August.
Her daughter had mentioned multiple different men giving her mom money. I mean, there's no doubt that she was more than likely escorting.
When we reached out to Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison about his department's assistance on the Bean case and how it could tie in with the Gilgo suspect, he noted for the initial investigation, the task force was geared to the 2007-2010 timeframe when the Gilgo 4 went missing and were murdered. We have a lot of information about his whereabouts. We would know where he was at a certain time frame. The time frame now concerns June 2017 in South Carolina, when Julia Ann Bean went missing. Her phone records have already been checked.
And thus far, we've not been able to make a connection with Rex Heuermann on those cell phone records.
Suffolk County said Heuermann was known to use burner phones. South Carolina authorities said there's been too much speculation about Bean on social media.
And of course, on social media, the world's gone wild.
And we do have some news here in New York. The Suffolk County Police Commissioner told us he's adding 2 investigators to the Gilgo Beach Task Force. They will focus on missing sex workers in Suffolk County and potential ties to Rex Heuermann. Also, DA Ray Tierney told me the Gilgo investigation is now expanding, hoping to solve the murders of 6 other people found on Ocean Parkway.
I always said, Mike, that when they took this case down, that instead of it being over, it was somewhat just beginning in a lot of ways. And you see on the screen, these are some of the other women that are missing that they haven't been able to connect Rex Heuermann to. It may be this Megan Warren, Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, The unidentified Asian male, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amber Costello. And then there was a woman by the name of Peaches, who they still don't have identified, and a toddler. So connecting all of these things are very, very difficult because, again, when we talk about physical evidence, DNA evidence, most of it is gone. And the remains, as was reported, was skeletonized. So as far as doing drug tests, toxicology, all of that stuff is way gone. The only way you can do it is old-fashioned detective work, talking to people, follow the paperwork. Rex Schuman's travel, his credit card, his bank records, his vehicle records, if he flew a plane down south. Look, they recovered the Chevy Avalanche in South Carolina. We're talking, he got rid of it, I think, 10 or 12 years ago. Right. So they would also be digging into that forensically, as they did, to see if they could recover any forensic evidence in regards to this case. And then, of course, the huge warrants they did on his home. And there's still, but they'll be working on that probably for a year, because and we can't say everything they took out of there is evidence. We don't know what is evidence and what is just things they collected that potentially could be evidence. So, and then he also had a storage facility, and then, of course, the safe with almost 300 guns in it. So all of that stuff is subject to investigation and takes a very long time to investigate.
And Bill, let's not forget, he's going to be using a laptop, and you got to figure personal laptop, his cell phone. He may be contacting other like-minded individuals, perhaps several other guys that he may be somewhat associated with who are regular visitors to escorts, to determine what they're, who they, if this is true, if it is possible that this is happening, who did he contact? Was there other guys that maybe he hung out with that maybe have visited escorts? What, if so, what are their names? Where do they live? How, what was their relationship with him? I doubt he was a complete lone wolf who never talked to anybody bonded with any other male over anything for the past 30 years. I have a hard time believing that. Somewhere along the line, I think he had some sort of quasi friend somewhere along the line. And maybe there is some information about that may be useful on his cell phone about other people he may have been associated with in the escort business. So that would hopefully be able to lead the investigators to some other possible, Johns who may have become violent with their escorts.
Absolutely. Folks, if you're looking for a great defense attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a retired member of the service, a retired police officer, and a fantastic defense attorney. You can contact Joe on his cell phone at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com, or go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Besides being a fantastic defense attorney, Joe Murray is a friend of the show and has supported this show probably for the last 4 years. He's one of our biggest supporters, and we appreciate everything he does for us. Yeah, it's the whole purpose, I think, with this is to keep this case out there, keep this case in the news, keep this case in the public consciousness. And again, it was a good thing last night that 48 Hours did a follow-up on this case. Did they come up with any new information? No. I don't know if there is brand new information on this case, but it's always good to look at the past information, because maybe someone out there will see this and give a call.
On Gilgo Beach, where a serial killer investigation was launched more than a dozen years ago. 4 dead women who came to be known as the Gilgo 4 were discovered here in the brush off Ocean Parkway in December 2010. Now police say they finally found the murderer.
He was living a double life. He had a wife, he had 2 kids, nice job as an architect.
And Rex Hewerman, 59, probably never expected to be surrounded by cops in Midtown as he left work on a Thursday evening.
Rex, did you do it?
Still wearing the same khakis, the towering suspect was accused of being the Gilgo Beach, Long Island serial killer known as Lisk, who eluded law enforcement for more than a dozen years.
But you were aware that he was patronizing of sex
It
workers?
certainly appeared as though he was, yes.
While investigators in white Tyvek suits immediately descended on Hewerman's lifelong home in Massapequa Park, armed with search warrants, the suspect was initially charged with murdering 3 of the Gilgo 4, Megan Waterman, Melissa Barthelemy, and Amber Costello, all petite online escorts who were discovered dead in 2010 with another escort, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, in the brush off Ocean Parkway.
The only thing I can tell you that he did say as he was in tears was, "I didn't do this."
3 of the sex workers were bound in burlap, and Hewerman was named the prime suspect in the murder of the 4th, Brainerd Barnes. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Park Deese consulted on the case of serial killer Joel Rifkin, another Long Island resident, and spoke to us about Hewerman's arrest.
The most common sexual motive for serial killings is sexual sadism. Becoming the god to that victim is the offender's primal goal.
The architect's neighbors on First Avenue in Massapequa Park were stunned that the hulking Hewerman hid the alleged crimes for so long. A map showing Wantagh Parkway near his home reveals how easily he could have driven to Ocean Parkway, close to the Jones Beach Exchange.
He grew up there as a kid with his parents.
Many thought that Hewerman's house was an eyesore. Detectives said they found hundreds of guns locked in a vault in the house, and fairly soon they were searching storage facilities nearby.
Are there body parts or things that we need to take a look at? Are there trophies of some of the victims that, unfortunately, that he stored in that location?
The crucial break in the case had come last year from a new interview with Amber Costello's roommate and pimp, who said that John had come to their house in Babylon on September 1st, 2010, the day before she vanished, and the client, described as ogre-like, was driving a green Chevy Avalanche.
The whole gist of this show is that this was the lead they had in 2010. And it took to 2023 for them to fully recognize that this was the lead. This was the identifier. This Massapequa Park phone pings, this Manhattan phone pings, this Babylon phone pings, this Freeport phone pings would identify the person with the burner phones. That very person was Rex Hewerman. And this took 12 years, even though it was in the case folder back in the day. And that is the question that all of us that aren't involved in this investigation are asking, because obviously Rodney Harrison, the Suffolk County Police Commissioner, he doesn't want to dwell on the negative. To him, this is negative. I'm moving forward. I'm going to continue this investigation. What they did in the past, I can't do anything about that. However, we, the general public, we who have been following this case, can ask that question. Why did it take 12 and a half, 13 years to put this lead together that they put together in 6 weeks and identified the Long Island serial killer?
Yeah, Billy, the idea that this, if it was something like Rex Hewerman was 5'10", brown hair, brown eyes, rather plain looking, driving a silver, Honda, something like that, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's not a great description. But, 6'6", ogre, 250, 300 pounds, those oval shaped glasses looking like an ogre. Yeah, there's no excuse for that to be sitting around, not investigated and leads developed. Like you said, we've a couple of months after that, they got the information on the box in Massapequa Park. So, like you say, he's probably some sort of commuter, like thousands and thousands of other people. Start hitting the, gets a couple of undercovers, go just stand on the train platforms, the LIRR train platforms, and just see who gets on in the morning, who gets off in the evening. Drive around the parking lots, around the train station parking lots. See if you could find an Avalanche, that sort of thing. It wasn't one of those cars that they made a million of. It was a failed kind of attempt to a hybrid, kind of like dual, sedan slash pickup truck. They weren't that popular. They discontinued them. So it's inexcusable, no matter what. If it's corruption, incompetence, whatever, it's inexcusable. And all we can hope is that, Amber's Costello, not Amber Costello, Amber Costello, that is the possible last person that might have been killed by him, and that there was no other further girl harmed at all. But the public has every right to be upset with this, and you can't blame them at all. No, absolutely not.
Mike, I'm not blaming them, and I'm trying to think like someone in the public. And of course,
Yeah.
everyone in the public points to the corruption of the Suffolk County Police Department,
Right.
specifically Chief Burke and the Suffolk County District Attorney Spoda, who's still in prison
By the
over
way.
this matter. Yes. So, and then of course the way that Shannan Gilbert died. It's not conclusive to anyone that's following this case. It seems, as you would say in New York, fugazi. Something untoward happened to her. And it seems like it's not like anyone follows could say, oh, they're covering this up. It's connected. And I don't believe that, but I can see why the public believes it. I 100% can see.
6 weeks later, on March 14th, 2022, the name Rex Heuermann was first mentioned as a suspect in the Gilgo case.
Not only did he own the Chevy Avalanche, but he matched the physical description.
During a Google search of old maps, investigators discovered a green Chevy Avalanche parked outside Heuermann's house in plain sight. And now a former escort is coming forward to say she talked about true crime investigations with Rex Heuermann during a date. Long Island stylist Nicole Brass appeared on Cuomo.
And I said, well, have you heard of the Gilgo Beach murders? Like his body language kind of changed, and like his eyes were like as if he was in a different place, like he was picturing it all over again. Like, it was weird. He almost kind of made the victims like seem like people who didn't matter.
Heuermann's wife has now filed divorce papers, which were not contested. The wife's sister, Johanna, spoke briefly to Pix 11 News from her Long Island home.
We don't know anything. We're hearing about most of it on the news ourselves. So we're just going to refrain from saying anything.
And there are more revelations about the people Rex Heuermann did work for. Aside from contracts with New York City and Target, documents reveal he received $200,000 from former President Donald Trump's company to renovate office space at a downtown building. The revelations just reinforce investigators' beliefs that the serial killer suspect lived two lives. Dr. Dietz said he would like to know if the burly Heuermann was bullied in his childhood. Law enforcement wants to know if the suspect is connected to 6 other Ocean Parkway victims, some of them dismembered.
It could be that they are all linked or that some are linked. It would be quite a coincidence to have another serial killer working in the same area at the same time, but it's happened before.
Families of the victims who lived in upstate cities or out of state had to fight to get the attention of law enforcement because the women were categorized as sex workers. Relatives of the victims often held vigils here and demanded they get treated with dignity. Now they've seen the face of the accused killer.
He just looks like a cold monster. And in his eyes, I mean, you can just see that it's like a sociopath.
Victim Amber Costello's aunt watched the serial killer case unfold from her home in North Carolina. Other families somberly followed District Attorney Ray Tierney into court when the gruesome indictment was unsealed. One of them was the younger sister of victim Melissa Barthelemy. The sister was just 15, according to family, when the accused killer made taunting phone calls in 2009 using Barthelemy's cell phone.
Is this Melissa's little sister? That's how he started out the conversation. Is this Melissa's little sister? And she answered yes.
Megan Waterman's daughter was just 3 when her mother disappeared.
Helpless.
This surveillance shows Megan Waterman, just 22, in the early hours of June 6, 2010, shortly before she left the Holiday Inn Express in Hauppauge, Long Island, to meet a client. Prosecutors say that John was architect Rex Heuermann, based on calls from a burner phone he allegedly bought the day before Waterman met her demise.
And for each of the murders, he got an individual burner phone, and he used that to communicate with the victims.
Amber Costello, 27, was the last of the Gilgo Four to disappear. Court papers indicate her roommate and pimp tried to act like an outraged boyfriend when the suspect allegedly showed up at their Babylon rental on September 1st, 2010, looking for sexual services.
They wanted to rip him off.
Heuermann allegedly texted Amber Costello saying, "That was not so nice. Do I get credit for next time?" Her roommate watched her leaving the house the next day, taking nothing with her.
He was really worried because when she went out the door, she didn't take her purse or her cell phone. He was like, "You're forgetting them." And she said, "I'm not going to need them."
Amber Costello's body was discovered 3 months later with the Gilgo 4 on Ocean Parkway.
He's huge. None of these girls.
You know, Dawn Clayderman, he carried his personal cell and the burner at the same time. He only called the girls on the burners. Once he killed someone, he took their phone. They have three. You finished your. You didn't make the whole. 3 simultaneous pings off same towers. You know, Dawn, one of the things I want to know, and we don't know the answer to this because they haven't told us, did they recover the cell phones of Melissa Bartolome and Maureen Brainerd Barnes that he used to call their families? In the search warrant, could you imagine how powerful of evidence that would be if they recovered the cell phones belonging to Melissa Bartolome and Maureen Brainerd Barnes that were used to call and taunt their family members? That's beyond the souvenir, you know. It's beyond the trophy, as they would say. That is something that he probably cherished. But again, I don't know. Did they recover in the search warrants the burner phones? Right. How powerful of evidence would that be if they actually recovered these burner phones? Tremendous, tremendous evidence. And again, all of the other potential evidence, which we have no clue about, that they recovered in his house. And also in the storage facility, his computer and his own cell phone has to be a treasure trove of evidence and information. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, we when you look at the Koberger case, you know, there was some interesting information released about contents of his of his Washington University apartment, and you know, you got a little bit more information as to what was seized. Here, we don't have that information. Hopefully, we will find out in dribs and drabs over the coming months. You know, once they set a trial date and they start the discovery process by turning over everything to the defense, then maybe we'll get some more information. That would be a rock solid bit of information. That would be wonderful. He probably is some sort of trophy collector. It might be something like a ring. It might be a camera, it might be a shoe. Who knows? It might be their underwear. You don't know. But it does seem that, as we saw with the BTK killer case, he did keep a few pieces of information, a few items, maybe driver's license, just something to help him occasionally relive the thrill of when he goes back and he could touch it. It gives him that real tactile sense that he could go back there in his mind and relive the actual killing. So it would be a wonderful thing for law enforcement if he was that kind of collector. And my God, a cell phone would be the pièce de résistance as far as having a bit of circumstantial evidence to put this guy away.
100%. It's such powerful evidence. William Grant, there's something about men with power and money and their perverted sexual desires. The town I was raised in had a public washroom sting with over 35 high-ranking business people and a judge. Sick. You know something? You're right. I mean, we always say that truth is much stranger than fiction. Mm-hmm. And I know that's a cliche, but it's so true. When you find out, who would believe that this guy Burke was trolling in a park after he did 4 years in a federal prison, and was arrested for a sex crime inside a park, soliciting an undercover police officer. Who would believe that? Who would believe that the things that he did, the things that he was accused of, the things that he was convicted of? You wouldn't believe that a chief of police for Suffolk County did those things. But it's, again, truth is much stranger than fiction. We had Dr. Joni Johnston on her phone, and the doctor that was consulting with WPIX. One of the things he said, and Dr. Joni Johnston said the same thing, which is consistent with serial killers, is most of them are psychosexual, sadistic people. And that's what he was. And that's why he called the family members using the phones of Melissa Bartolome and Maureen Brainerd Barnes. And he got a thrill out of that. He got inflicting pain on others was how he got his thrills. Rather despicable. That's why I said, if they do recover those phones in the search warrant, or they did recover those phones in the search warrant, it's just such a score.
Yeah, Billy, that's like the most wonderful piece of circumstantial evidence you can get. You just hope that he took something, and I'd bet my paycheck he did. That would be fabulous, because that would just show that this isn't just speculation. This isn't just, well, we put together a mathematical formula, we figured out with electronics where a phone was. No, when you show that phone, you're the prosecutor. If you could show that phone to the jury as you're discussing it, and they could hold it in their hands and realize this is a phone that belonged to one of those poor girls. If you have that kind of evidence, I mean, as a district attorney, that would be amazing. Just keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll find out. But he might, again, he's smart and stupid at the same time. He might be smart enough to get rid of something like that. He got rid of the burner phones, but he's also stupid is the fact that even after he realized the task force was being put together in January of 2022, he continued to call sex workers on a burner phone. So he's smart and stupid at the same time. Let's just hope he's stupid enough.
Mike, one of the things that really touched me is that what he did, what we would call in law enforcement as counter surveillance.
Yeah.
And he was searching on his computer to see what the investigators were doing regarding the Gilgo Beach serial killer. And he was, in essence, doing surveillance on them, which we would call, of course, counter surveillance, counterintelligence, to find out if he was still safe, if he was doing all the things necessary to thwart their investigation. And to use a Gearyism again, it's a consciousness of guilt.
That's right. That's right. Because all it would take would be, this is a huge story, especially out on Long Island, and other places, but especially on Long Island, because that's where it all happened. That's ground zero. And there's probably every month or two, there's going to be a reporter calling up one of the detectives saying, do you have anything new? Is there anything you could tell me? And all it takes is one slip of the tongue by one of the detectives to say, yeah, we're zeroing in on a guy from Massapequa Park. And if they said just something like that, and that would make the papers, boom, it's all over. He's going to stop whatever he's going to do, and you're not going to get anything more information. And, that's it. Whatever you've gotten already, you got it. But that would really destroy any sort of confidentiality you would have. But just one, loose lips sink ships. So that is really difficult. And I'm glad they moved in when they did, because they were out there doing a lot of work, and they were very worried that sooner or later there was going to be just a small innocent slip up, just once. It would be on the internet. And even if it was a small story, if he Googled it and he found it, he would know the jig is up.
Absolutely. Let me just play this, and then we'll.
He met with homicide detectives on multiple occasions during the initial years of the investigation. He told detectives then what he repeated again last year, and that led to the arrest of the suspect.
It was a tip about this Chevy Avalanche that led to the arrest of Gilgo Beach serial killer suspect Rex Uerman. The clue coming from the victim Amber Costello's Long Island roommate at the time. David Schaller telling the Associated Press he spoke with homicide detectives multiple times more than a decade ago when Costello vanished. He was re-interviewed in 2022 and brought it up again. Schaller telling the AP, quote, "I gave them the exact description of the truck and the dude. I mean, come on. Why didn't they use that?" We went to the Brooklyn address listed for Schaller now, but he wasn't available to speak with us Saturday night. Schaller had also told investigators a decade ago that he came face to face with the suspect in the driveway of their West Babylon home, telling the AP, quote, "When they told me she was dead, he was the first person who jumped in my head. I've been picturing his face for 13 years. Suffolk District Attorney Ray Tierney on what Schaller said.
Specifically, the individuals between 6'4" and 6'6", come well over 200 pounds.
Tierney says detectives connected the victim to burner phones back in 2012, but it wasn't until years later that detectives narrowed that to a region of Massapequa Park and cross-referenced it with DMV records. According to vehicle history reports, Uerman bought the pickup at a Chevy dealer on Long Island in 2002 and transferred ownership to his brother in South Carolina in 2012. Tierney, who became DA in 2022, explains why the tip got buried.
When they're getting that's lost within a sea of other tips and information they're getting. And at the time, there wasn't really any, coherent leadership at the top. There is no interaction between the FBI and the other agencies.
And retired Suffolk Police Detective Rob Trotta, who worked with the FBI, tells me it really was a Suffolk Police Department and District Attorney's Office in crisis more than a decade ago.
I really think this should have been solved, 3 weeks after that body was found. The head of the District Attorney's Office was a guy named Jimmy Burke, who later became the chief of police. We know now that he was a criminal. He went to federal prison. The district attorney at the time is still in federal prison. And I think what happened was, and I know this firsthand because I've talked to retired inspectors and chiefs in the police department, they were unaware that the car was there. They were unaware that there was a 6'4" male as a suspect. They were not being told this.
And tonight, the suspect, Rex Uerman, remains behind bars in the Suffolk County Jail. He has pled not guilty and is charged with 3 of the murders. He's the prime suspect in a 4th, but 10 sets of human remains were found along Ocean Parkway, and the investigation continues into those.
Well, folks, we started with and finished with the exact same thing because we wanted to stress this about that green Chevy Avalanche that was given, the information was given to the Suffolk police in 2010, and not until 2023 was this information acted upon, and did they identify the owner of that green Chevy Avalanche, of that 6'6" ogre human being that lived in Massapequa Park by the name of Rex Uerman. So that was basically our whole dissertation for tonight's show as to why did it take this long. And I don't think we specifically gave you an answer to that. We gave you some more questions. But I always think it's good because when you ask questions, you get answers. Eventually, maybe not tonight, but we will get answers to this. And this keeps the case in the public consciousness. It keeps you folks entertained. I hope we entertained you. And it keeps us up on this case. Mike, we've been on for an hour and a half. Final thoughts?
I think, ADA Tierney said it best in that last clip you showed. There was no coherent leadership. And there was several Suffolk County police commissioners, and you probably had a lot of people, underlings, chiefs, captains, lieutenants, all probably jumping out the windows when they realized that there's also sort of federal investigation going on with the FBI, bad blood between the FBI and them, maybe bad blood between the state troopers also in Suffolk County. A fish rots from the head on down. And so therefore, if you don't have leadership at the top, nothing's going to get done. He said it right. He's 100% right. There's no excuse for it. And hopefully, with Commissioner Harrison in there now, leading Suffolk County, and ADA Tierney on the prosecution side, you're going to have a department and a district attorney's office that's above board, honest, and is actually working for the citizens and competent, and they can put this guy away.
Absolutely. Amber and Cambro, thank you for the $2 super sticker. Hi, friends. Don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you so much, Amber. And I also want to remind everyone, today it was Dawn Marie's birthday. I didn't get to, I wrote it in the chat. Dawn Marie, if you're still in the chat, happy birthday. Thank you for all you do. She's a mod in our chat all the time. She does a fantastic job. She's always plugging the Police Off the Cuff podcast. And I hope you had a very happy 21st birthday. I know you're no older than 21, but thank you so much for all you do. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Thanks for tuning in tonight. God bless, and we'll see you soon.
Good night.